Hey YouTube, I hope you guys are doing fantastic. It's been a long time since I posted on here, but I was in a discussion today regarding vitiligo, which is a autoimmune disease that affects the melanin in our skin. So people receive like white patches of skin basically. I wanted to share recent findings and an explanation from all the research I've done over many years now as to why this happens, that there's different causes for various cases in people, and how to heal it for at least most people. I think this is something that is important for everyone to look into. But I was recently formally diagnosed with celiac, which is like gluten intolerance or disease, basically. There's three different things. There's gluten sensitivity, gluten intolerance, and then you have like celiac disease. Now, celiac can be non-symptomatic, meaning you don't experience the symptoms, but it's going on in your system, which I would suspect a lot of people with vitiligo have, or they have symptoms of celiac disease, gas, bloating, diarrhea, constipation, fatigue, things like that after consuming things with gluten. And as we know, there's gluten everywhere. But it's really interesting, the connection between gluten and like gluten intolerance, celiac disease, and vitiligo. So way back when I posted to you guys these videos about how to heal vitiligo and how I was successful in healing my vitiligo, you'll notice that I talked about going grain-free or gluten-free in the diets as part of an anti-inflammatory diet. And for my case, that worked because I had celiac disease but didn't really know that. When I was pregnant, I kind of fell off the bandwagon and was eating gluten and kind of stopped my supplements because my symptoms got better, because pregnancy lowers the immune system to help protect the baby. And so it's interesting that my vitiligo was improving, I was repigmenting, I was eating gluten like crazy during my pregnancy, and all seemed well, except towards the end I started having weird blotches of light, and we were worried about blood pressure and things like that. But I really think it was my celiac acting up during pregnancy. It's also interesting, I had a miscarriage last year that I think was linked to non-diagnosed celiac. So a lot of people with celiac disease that are not diagnosed will experience miscarriages, infertility. It's been really hard for us to have another kid. And we're getting like frustrated. I'm like, what's wrong with this? But now it all makes sense, right? So previously, my explanation for people to heal their vitiligo was addressing the fact that, one, I think it's caused by different root problems for people, different deficiencies. It's kind of functional medicine. I believe that when the body has certain deficiencies and you supplement those deficiencies, the body can heal. And that's what happened in my case. So a lot of people with vitiligo are deficient in B12, vitamin D, folic acid, things like that. And so I had done a bunch of research on the commonalities of people with vitiligo, and it was those deficiencies. I also looked into ginkgo biloba and copper, which I was also deficient in, was copper. And I treated those deficiencies, changed my diet to a low inflammation diet, and I was able to repigment. Following those protocol, I was able to probably repigment in about like 3 weeks. I started seeing little brown patches on the spots. I used to have it all over my face. I have like mosquito bites and pimples everywhere right now. And on my hands, my groin, my feet. I still have some patches to start healing again too because I got lazy. It's hard to follow something religiously in this household because we're so busy, but it's definitely possible. And if it's something you want to do, I think that you can absolutely do it. So I am not a doctor, but I've been studying functional medicine and alternative remedies and things that you don't need a prescription for over 10 years now. And I've seen these things work. It's really cool when people will respond to videos I've posted about this protocol and they tell me that they've repigmented, that they've healed. And honestly, sometimes it makes me cry. Like I had a mother being like, my daughter has been bullied for vitiligo and it's repigmenting, she's healing. And like, I get all excited because I know how depressing and isolating it is to have vitiligo and have people staring at you. I remember when I was in the airport, I was all over my face and kids are just staring at me, and I wanted to come up with some story like I was burned in a fire, saving kittens, it was totally worth it, you know, that kind of thing. But it's definitely difficult having people stare, and whatever, the world is a cruel place sometimes, right? And people can't handle something that's different. So And this is not to shame people who are at peace with their vitiligo, but when there's something like vitiligo going on, it is a serious sign that there's something wrong going on with your body and your system, right? It's like an external, hey, something's not right, and it's letting you know that you need to address issues going on in your body. So here are things that I recommend. One, I would do a hair analysis test, not even the skin allergy test, but I would get a hair test that collects the root of your hair. I use several different companies. I'm not going to mention that because I'm not getting paid to say any of this stuff and I don't want it to come off as that way, but you can look online, try to find certified labs that you can send a hair analysis in for that will look at food intolerances, which is different from a food allergy. Food intolerances are amongst all of us, and we have no idea what we're intolerant to. And so we eat these foods that cause chronic inflammation in the body, which is also an underlying cause for a lot of diseases and disorders in our bodies. And we're not even aware of it, you know? So once you understand what you're intolerant to, you can change your diet. It's going to reduce inflammation in your body. You can also take things that are anti-inflammatory, like turmeric with pepperin extract, which helps the body to make it more bioavailable or absorb it. So turmeric is an amazing anti-inflammatory supplement, food. It's basically a root, just like ginger. You can get the root at a store, at a grocery store, or you can get the capsules with pepperin already in it, which I recommend, and take that, and it'll help reduce inflammation in the body. In some studies, it's as effective as prednisone, which is a steroid, and that's pretty cool. Keep in mind these alternative things that don't have patents, that are available to everyone, typically don't get included in studies and don't get funded because unfortunately in Western medicine it is largely biased by profit. That is just a fact. Doesn't mean everybody's evil and they're out to kill all of us, but meaning that there are some things that get pushed to the back that don't receive the praise and research that's really, I think, warranted. Anyway, so when you get this hair test, you can also have it check for heavy metals, right? We have so much toxicity in our environment, in our food, our drinking water, our products that we put on our face and hair and body, things like that. We absorb like 60% of what we put on our skin. Think about all the cosmetics and synthetic hormones that you put into your body. And why I mention that is that some people, maybe all, but some people seem to have a genetic predisposition for vitiligo. My theory after like 10 plus years about researching about healing and medicine is that people have a genetic predisposition in their body. And what research shows is that it can be triggered by environmental, meaning external things like food, medicines, toxins that we consume, hormone imbalances, chronic inflammation in the body, things like that. So my vitiligo was triggered after Gardasil, probably because I had a genetic predisposition. Everyone on my mother's side of the family has an autoimmune disease, but they all manifest into different diseases. But what we have in common is a genetic predisposition for autoimmunity. And so how can we heal that? They can be healed. So that goes into gut healing protocol. Western medicine kind of acknowledges this, and I think they call it like intestinal permeability is the word that they use. But a lot of people that are into healing and natural medicine will call it leaky gut syndrome. And basically what happens is the intestines, or the villi, which are like little fingers inside our intestines, start to degrade and go away. And so we can't absorb our nutrients and food between those fingers because they're gone. And so food is passing through. And eventually it starts to degrade to the point that there are like holes in our intestines. And so undigested food particles and particles of things basically leak through that intestinal wall out into our system and can actually cause autoimmune diseases. I believe food intolerances and reactions because the body's like, whoa, what is this weird random floating thing? And it begins to attack it. It causes a response. So I think that makes perfect sense. I wish they would acknowledge it more and actually study it. But we're getting there. We're leaning more towards the understanding of gut health, probiotics, the damages of antibiotics, probiotics in our culture and our Western medicine, so that's fantastic. So what causes that leaky gut? And it's usually food intolerances, that chronic inflammation. For me, it was celiac. It basically degraded my villi so much that I'm not even absorbing nutrients properly, which causes those vitamin deficiencies in our system. So it's interesting. One point to kind of prove this is that people who are deficient in vitamin D with vitiligo, they'll notice that when they go out into the sun, they may get a sunburn, but they also have repigmenting going on. And it's because they're absorbing vitamin D directly through the sun, through their skin, without having to digest it, right? Because you're not absorbing vitamin D through your intestines because the villi are so broken down or gone or absent that they're not able to get it. But being out physically in the sunlight, they're able to absorb that vitamin D. So I think that's a really interesting point. People started repigmenting. That's very cool. So people can do a leaky gut anti-inflammatory diet by removing grains, unfortunately by removing dairy. Dairy is a highly inflammatory food. And I know like no one wants to hear that, right? People literally have a physical addiction in their brain basically to dairy. But you can try a bunch of other dairy alternatives. It's amazing. It also helps a lot of other animals not be abused. It's great. I love cheese. It's one of those things, sometimes I slip up once in a while, so I'm not perfect. But if we all make simple choices like that, I think we can honestly help heal ourselves and make massive improvements. Another way you can heal your gut is L-glutamine powder and Chinese bone broth soup, which is like an ancient method for healing illness, and it's a wonderful remedy. It's high in like chondroitin, glucosamine, all sorts of wonderful nutrients that are taken from the bone, and basically you roast it for like 24 to 48 hours and it creates like a gelatin at the top basically, but there's a lot of dense nutrients in there and it actually starts to heal the intestines. So L-glutamine powder you'll find in a lot of workout stores and gyms and things like that, but you take about a tablespoon of that in a glass of water about 30 minutes before a meal, and that helps heal the intestinal lining so that it's not permeable anymore. I would also assume that anything like slippery elm, something that kind of helps coat the intestines and soothe that inflammation would be beneficial as well. And then you get into the whole avenue of probiotics. So again, when we use antibiotics, studies are now showing that they permanently alter our gut flora. You know, even if you have some of the good bacteria and yeast grow back, it's not in the same levels. It's not as diverse. It's critical to try and avoid antibiotics unless it is absolutely necessary. And we know in our country here in the United States of America that we overprescribe antibiotics all the time, even for like viral infections, which has no benefit at all. They actually be like completely counter helpful for viral, because antibiotics do not treat viral things. That is a virus, not a bacteria, things like that. So it's interesting when people start to boost their natural gut flora through things like homemade milk kefir. People have cured their IBS, their Crohn's, their autoimmune diseases by simply doing milk kefir. Now, remember we just said like cut out dairy, whatever. People who have an issue with lactose intolerance usually can handle milk kefir, homemade milk kefir, because about 99% of the lactose has been digested. And there are other options to make milk kefir with. There's water kefir, although I don't think it's as great, but homemade milk kefir has about 54 beneficial strains of yeast and bacteria compared to the store-bought stuff, which has like 11 to 12 different strains, probably dead on the shelf, just not as effective. When you start making and drinking this, you also should supplement that culture in your stomach by eating like leafy greens and things like that too. So as you'll notice, this whole theme is like radical diet change, right? And it's hard. It's totally hard to do. I fell off the bandwagon as well. But once you get back on it, it's so good for you. It's your health. It's your future. You can teach these healthy habits to your family, so it's like passed on, and you can have a wonderful, healthy family and for future generations as well too. But it's really interesting. So when we talk about vitiligo being triggered by external factors, those heavy metals, being exposed to toxins, being exposed to heightened repeated Th2 responses. So I briefly talked about how mine was triggered after my Gardasil. Basically, there's a world-leading immunologist that talks about this, and it's in a textbook that's taught in some medical schools, but it's called Vaccines and Autoimmunity. And this isn't a debate about whether vaccines can prevent diseases or whatever. This is a debate about people who have a genetic predisposition that it can trigger certain things. Just like we know that people with an epileptic genetic predisposition can be triggered by immunizations. That's scientific fact. But the debate's not about that. This is about Th2 responses. So basically, when we have an immunization, it causes a heightened Th2 response. And when we so the body basically ramps up, it gears up. And so when we keep doing that same response, sometimes people with a genetic predisposition, their Th2 response doesn't basically go back down to normal. And it sends their system into like a tizzy, a whirlwind. And that's when we'll see some sort of autoimmune disease manifest itself in certain people. And so I've talked to a lot of people with vitiligo that were like, yeah, after this, I was exposed to this or had this immunization, then my vitiligo manifested. Some people grew up with vitiligo after a certain age, but it's interesting looking at that. And if we can reduce our triggers or detox or change our diet, that we're actually able to resolve those cases. So it's a lot of information I crammed in here. My older videos will go over what protocols 100% to do, like how many milligrams of ginkgo biloba, but I think it's like 60 milligrams of ginkgo biloba at least 2 to 3 times a day. I wore a copper magnetic bracelet so I would absorb the copper through my skin. I took vitamin D every day, just like a daily amount. You probably could take more than that, but again, talk to your doctor, figure out what you want to do. And folic acid, some people will take a prenatal vitamin because it is so dense in nutrients that it kind of compensates for that lack of absorption that a lot of people with vitiligo are experiencing, especially people with celiacs. So that is a lot of information. I'm going to cut it short at that. Just go ahead and start researching. You can kind of make your own conclusions, I guess, on maybe what your root cause is. I would definitely do a hair analysis test. I would change your diet. I would start supplementing, and those big things are like B12, vitamin D, ginkgo biloba. Those, I think, are my main 3 guys I would recommend, and probably folic acid as well. So good luck with that, you guys. Just wanted to give you an update, and hopefully many of you are able to heal. And I always love hearing progress stories or when people comment, they're like, I'm seeing spots now, like, yay, or I'm fully recovered. That's super exciting. I was told by dermatologists there is no cure, and for many months, I would say weeks, I was very depressed, but after researching further, it was fantastic to find out that there are other options to heal. So anyway, YouTube, I hope you guys are doing great. It was fantastic sharing the information with you, and I hope it helps. Bye-bye.